All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Madi. I'm one of the IRDR residents over at Mass General. I'm a PGY3, second year of radiology. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please feel free to type any questions in. If you have any questions or concerns or having issues, we'll try to address those. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started. We have all of our panelists online, and we're going to start with some intros. So we're going to start with the recent applicants. So Rachel is going to lead us off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm originally from Worcester, Massachusetts. I went to Georgetown down in DC for medical school, and I'm currently an intern at Mass General in the surgery program, and I'm an IRDR categorical resident.
Great, thanks. And then next we have Mangala.
Hello everyone, my name is Mangala. I'm a PGY3 R2 at Emory in the IRDR program. Originally from New Jersey, and I went to Brown for medical school. I did the transitional year, intern year at Emory.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we have Lauren.
Hi, my name is Lauren Park. I grew up in Ashburn, Virginia. I went to Brown for med school like Mangala, and currently a surgical intern at Georgetown, and I'm a categorical IRDR resident at Georgetown.
Cool, thank you. And then Rena.
Hi, I'm Rena. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I went to LECOM in Erie. Currently, I'm a PGY1 at Hennepin County for a TY year. I'm a categorical IRDR resident.
Okay, cool. And then Emily.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily. I went to Jefferson for med school. I'm originally from Montana. I'm doing my intern year at Lincoln Medical Center in Philly right now in medicine, and then I'll be going to the University of Colorado for IRDR.
Sweet. Okay, and then we're also super fortunate to be joined by two program directors, Dr. An from Brown and Dr. Meek from Arkansas. So Dr. An, if you want to say anything.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sun An. I'm the program director at Brown's IR program. Welcome. I'm glad a lot of you are on the call today. Hopefully we can get some good information disseminated.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Meek?
Hi, I'm Molly Meek. I'm the program director at Arkansas. I've been in practice for about 10 years, and I'm also the division director, which adds an interesting level of stress to family dynamics and work and all kinds of stuff.
All right, great. So we're going to start off with some questions that were submitted. Like I said, to anyone listening out there, there is a little option at the beginning, at the bottom of the screen, that hopefully you should be able to submit any questions if they come up. But one of the first questions I got was, how do you guys, or when you were applying, what are some of the things you looked at in terms of programs when you were assessing and deciding which ones to apply to, which ones you want to interview at, and then ultimately your rank list? So we can start with, let's start with Emily on that one.
Okay, so I applied pretty broadly. I grew up in Montana, and my ultimate goal was to kind of go back west. So I kind of focused on the west, but I'd also been on the East Coast for med school and undergrad, and so I also kind of went east. And so I think a lot of people have geographic preferences, and I definitely had those as well. And then in terms of programs I applied to, a lot of it was talking to the residents and fellows at my school, the residents and fellows at the way that I did, and getting their opinions on what programs they thought were good, which ones had strong radiology in general and strong interventional radiology. And that's kind of how I decided where to apply. And then a lot of deciding with the rank list was kind of how I felt on the day of the interview, how I felt the residents seemed to interact with each other, how I interacted with them. So it's a very loaded question, but there's definitely a lot of factors that go in, but I think geography is a good way to kind of start narrowing it down at the beginning.
Sounds good. Rena, what do you think about it?
So I For IR, I also applied broadly, and then I applied a little bit more specifically for DR, based on, geographic location and what I'd heard about the programs. And also, being a DO, I think one of the things I was looking at are programs that had accepted DOs before or had DOs as staff, just to see what it's not, it didn't mean that I didn't apply to places that didn't have DOs, but that's something that I took into consideration, making sure that a good percentage of my applications went to places that had DOs.
And sorry, Rena, just to follow up, just because I got a specific question for you from someone. Do you have any advice for applying from a school that does not have an IR department?
So I got lucky that my small hospital had an IR department, but I also went out of my way during my third and fourth year to try to do away rotations at places that had strong IR departments. So that's definitely, your audition rotations will matter a lot. So that would be my recommendation, is to be proactive. I mean, I guess it's already kind of late in the season to be doing that, but if you make those connections, and also going to like the medical student symposiums and like meeting people there, the connections really matter. And as much if you can make an impression on someone, they'll help you in the long run.
Definitely. All right. Thank you for answering that, Rena. Lauren, going back to the original question about, kind of how you assess programs broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely give my, personal thought process in asking a lot of the residents on SIR-RFS, which I have been heavily involved in, but also making a list and asking Dr. An for his opinion, and kind of asking, mentors for their thoughts on what makes sense and what they don't know about the programs and whatnot. But also this spring, I actually did a quick survey of about 50 of the students who applied this 2018 cycle, and in terms of what factors they considered in applying and what factors they considered for ranking. And just to read off first top 5 for places to apply, students considered integrated, whether the program has integrated residency track as number 1, quality of clinical IR training as number 2, diversity and volume of IR caseloads as number 3, location as number 4, and ESIR plus independent residency track as number 5. But in terms of making the final rank list, students considered overall fit their number 1, which I agree with. Number 2, whether they have integrated residency track. Number 3, diversity and volume of IR caseloads. 4, location, and 5, quality of clinical IR training. So I think students are considering a lot of IR factors before DR factors and making their final decision, even for applying and us for making the final rank list. And to give everyone kind of a general idea, average number of programs that students applied to this year was 43. And average number of IR program interviews were 19. So I hope that kind of gives everyone more general picture than just my personal thoughts on this subject.
Wow, Lauren, that was a really, really good answer, and definitely something I wish I had even known when I was applying. So good job on that survey. Mangalo, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think Lauren pretty much did a good summary. I would just say, some things to look at that I considered additionally were if you're marginally interested in, like pediatric IR or neuro IR, it's like really early to tell, but I looked for places that had programs with those subspecialties just because I wanted to get exposure as I trained. So that was the only thing I would add.
Nice. And Rachel?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, just that I think for me, location was very important. The quality of the radiology training in addition to the interventional radiology training, and then seeing women on faculty and then women sort of embedded in the radiology and IR programs themselves as well.
Great. Doctors On and Meek, do you guys have anything to add?
I guess I would just say that, there's a lot of things to consider. I think it can become a little bit overwhelming. There's a couple of things I would keep in mind. It's, just using last year's statistics, it is a highly competitive residency application process. But at the same time, keep in mind that there are multiple different ways or avenues to become an interventional radiologist as the final goal. But clearly the integrated match is going to be competitive again this year, if last year was any reflection. So, I would try to gather as much information as possible. And, just pretty much everything all the other panelists have said in terms of fit, in terms of quality of education, consideration of the DR program. It is 5 to 6 years, prime years of your life where you're going to have to live. I just want to make sure that you're going to be happy where you are.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Meek, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with everything everybody said, and don't forget that you can always, it seems like you're making a decision that is this huge thing and kind of the end all be all, but people change programs and they change career courses, and things in general work out for the best in the end. And it's hard to appreciate. It seems like such a monumental thing, the interviewing and the match, and I'm not saying it's not, but it's things can change and you can move around and stuff. So just keep that in mind. It's not always the final end thing.
Got it. Okay, so I have another set of questions, kind of like diving in a little bit more into the actual application process. So the first one I have is when you're applying to an IR program, is it necessary to apply to DR program at that specific institution? That's definitely a question I had when I was applying. So maybe we could start with the program directors about what you feel is the right answer to that.
No, I don't think you have to.
Yeah, go ahead, Mal. I'll go after you.
I mean, I don't think you have to. I think it sort of depends if you know anything about the program and what the relationship between the IR and DR programs are. If you're really not going to go to the DR program there, then some programs have separate interview days. I mean, there are lots of things to think about when you're asking that. If it's the same interview days and you can do it all in one and you would be interested in the DR program, then I would apply to both. But if there's zero chance you're going to go somewhere and the interview days are different and you're going to have to travel longer or spend more money to do it, then I wouldn't, and you're a competitive candidate, then I wouldn't necessarily do that. If you're not as competitive a candidate, then I think it's a good idea to apply to DR programs as well.
I would also, I would add that, in general, the advice we have been giving to the students applying is that, if you're applying to a certain institution for the IR training program, you are doing it for the quality of the IR program. And so if that particular institution also has ESIR tracked or is large enough to accommodate IR training, that you should consider that DR program for the quality of the IR training that you would get as a DR resident. Now, having said that, there's a lot of other issues and there's a lot of other things that take into consideration. Clearly, time and cost and money, to travel for different interview days notwithstanding, I probably would recommend that you would apply to both. You have to kind of be a little bit savvy about, how you answer your questions, etc. But, if I'm applying to Mass General, for example, just to pick a program out of the hat, like if I'm applying to Mass General for interventional radiology, integrated program, and I probably would apply to the DR program as well, since you would be getting IR training during that program. And if they don't have any SIR program or there's no other pathway, that might be a little bit more of a challenge. But right now, I think you got to play a little bit of the odds and probably do both. That would be my opinion.
Yeah. Does anyone on the panel have anything to add to that in terms of their experience when they were applying this past year? Okay. I mean, yeah, go
can
ahead.
speak on behalf of the applicant side. So I did receive the same advice from Dr. An when I was applying. So I ended up applying to, if I was applying to an IR program, I applied to both their DR program and IR program. And the general sense that I got at a couple of the interviews was that it was expected to apply to the DR program when I'm applying to their IR program, to make sure that I'm serious about their program in general, including their DR program. I've also heard from a fellow applicant on an interview trail, although it may be a violation of match, he or she, they were asked specifically whether they applied to the DR program and that they should.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be asking that question.
Right.
I would also just say I feel like sometimes when you're applying, it's really hard to know what exactly the relationship is between the DR and IR program directors at a specific institution. I feel like that's kind of detailed information that's hard to get unless you really are in the know. So I'm not sure. I think definitely asking your mentors, because the IR community seems pretty small and they seem to know each other, is a good way to kind of suss that out too, if that's something you're thinking about.
I also found that even at places that had separate days for DR and IR interviews, at some places the DR PD is an APD for IR, so they kind of know if you're applying to both or not to both. So from that standpoint, I think it's best to apply to both if you're considering applying to their IR program.
Yeah, so the DR program director is by default the associate or assistant program director for the IR program. Like I'll just give, every program is a little bit different how they're going to run their days. I'll just give an example. So the Brown program, we usually have a dedicated interview day for the IR residents. However, my associate program director, I guess the DR program director, will also interview you during your IR program, IR residency interview day, and that will be your DR interview day as well. So we try to keep the costs down for the applicant, try to be sensitive of the expense. So just want to kind of summarize by saying that each program is a little bit different how they run their interview days for both IR and DR.
I would just add that, if you're considering a program for their IR, you really should want, just being a PGY3, like the diagnostic training is a big portion of your integrated residency. And I think you do want to pick somewhere where you're going to be happy with their DR training as well. And so I think it's, not only are they interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. And so going to both interview, sessions is very helpful in assessing if you'd actually want to be there for those years and train for that long at that facility.
Sounds good. So I'm just the next question. It's kind of a broad one, and I think it's aimed more towards the program directors, but I got a couple of questions that say, what do you consider to be a competitive candidate? No, it's a hard one, but I'll let you guys, take a stab at that.
You can go first.
Well, you're probably not going to like the answer since it's going to sound like a standard answer. I will tell you, having been part of many of these panels along with Dr. Meek, that, there's no one single answer. There's no one single criteria. We are judging the entire package, including your application packet, your CV, as well as the interview. But if we set aside first in terms of who do we grant interviews towards, clearly we are looking at, we are looking for people, number one, who can handle the academic load. So, of course, your clinical rotations scores are important. Just not in isolation, but it's part of the package. That is important. Your recommendation letters are important. Your board scores as a certain amount is something that we use, but I would say most programs are probably using that as to see, trying to identify students who may have a difficult time passing the boards towards the end, as opposed to a radiology boards, that is, as opposed to saying, we want to have people who are 99th ranked person on the board scores. Aside from your clinical performance and recommendations, we are in general looking for people who are committed and passionate about interventional radiology. So anything that can kind of attest to your passion or your commitment to IR is very important to us. So you can think about doing those things in terms of your track record. Have you been involved in some of the organizational stuff at the grassroots level at your institution, or nationally, if you're so inclined to be part of MSC, or helping put on webinars and such things like that? Or it could be through research and you've done stuff published or presented. But whatever that avenue is, we want to be able to see as much as we can that the applicant that we're looking at is, number one, aware of what interventional radiology is. Number two, committed and passionate about doing IR. And then, and number three, the application package. Now, once you get to the interview stage, really, sure, your application in terms of numbers and grades matter, but interview itself is quite important. And this is the advice you'll get from everyone. Your interview process starts soon as you start the minute you send your application in. So that's got to do with talking with the secretaries, email discourse, the interview itself, all those things are part of the interview process. The interview is quite important because we want to be working with people that we want to work with for 5 years. So I know it's kind of like saying, well, everything is important, but I think those are what most program directors are looking for.
Sweet. Dr.
Yeah,
Meeks,
I completely agree with everything you said. I feel like your application is sort of a hurdle to get an interview. And then once you've got an interview, things like scores and all of that stuff sort of falls out. And now you're looking for people that fit in with the other people in your program, people that you think are going to be hardworking and honest and are going to be able to deal with the stress of, being an IR doctor and doing complicated procedures and being up all night and those sorts of things. So the numbers and your application part matters in order to get the interview, but then the interview is a separate important thing because you want to make sure that you fit in the program and you want to make sure that the program fits with you, sort of. But exactly what he said as far as the detail is, I completely agree with.
All right. Thank you. So my next question that I have is submitted is how many IR interviews should you aim to have a reasonable chance of matching into IR? And I know that there's some data out there, and I don't know if the most recent data has been published yet. So if anyone knows the answer, feel free to answer. But I guess maybe the most reasonable way to maybe go down this is if you guys are comfortable sharing maybe how many IR interviews you did end up going to when you're applying. Maybe Rachel, if you want to start.
Sure. I think I applied basically from the Mid-Atlantic up to Boston. I was pretty geographic specific. So I think I applied to about 11 or 12 IR and then maybe 20 in total DR.
And then how many interviews did you go on?
So I think I went on about nine for IR and about 14 or 15 for DR.
Nice. All right. What about you, Mangala?
So I applied the very first year, so it was a little bit different because the
Yeah.
programs were rolling out as we were applying. But I think at the end I applied to maybe like 40 IR programs and maybe like 5 additional DR programs. And I ended up going on maybe 12 IR interviews and then 15 DR, but the DR was, most of them overlapped with the IR, and there were like 3 extra that were DR only.
Cool. Lauren?
Yeah, I applied very broadly. And so I applied to maybe about 54, 55 IR programs. And so I doubled that number with DR programs. And I applied to a few DR only programs as well. I interviewed at about 15 IR and DR programs. And I interviewed at 1 IR specific program. And then I went on 5 DR only programs.
Cool. Okay, Rena.
I applied to, I think, like 55-ish IR programs and I think about 35 to 40 DR programs. And I went on 12 IR interviews. 3 of those were IR only, and then 15 DR interviews.
Emily.
So I applied to like 35 IR programs or so, and then like 45 DR. Most of those were ones that I dual applied to IR.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going on like 16 IR interviews. One of those was IR only, and then I had 3 additional DR only interviews, and then the rest of them were like IR DR combined interviews.
Cool, thanks. And like I said at beginning of this question, I know that they do publish some data, and I found that helpful when I was applying, even though there wasn't IR data yet, just to get a sense of things, and also talking to whoever your mentor is, I think is pretty helpful. Do the program directors have anything to add to that?
The information is public. You can go on NRMP. You could do a Google search. You can just look up nrmp.org and with the additional search word of like match. And if you just kind of go through the links, there is and Lauren, you can speak to that too. Like there is a little program that not only does interventional radiology, but pretty much all the specialties that participate in the match. And when you pull up a particular specialty, then you can then get a stratified in terms of matched or not matched based on whatever criteria. So whether it's board score, whether it's research, whether it's away rotations. Admittedly, we don't have as much data points because we're so early in our match history, but it can kind of give you an idea. Like for example, like if you look at certain specialties, like orthopedics, for example, there's a huge disparity in the matched and the unmatched group in terms of board scores. The USMLE step 1 and step 2. If you look at interventional radiology, the last time I checked, the board scores for the matched group and the unmatched group, there was no difference. So you can kind of use that as an idea of like what the IR program directors are actually looking for. Does that make sense? Maybe we can, once we find the link, maybe we can disseminate to the webinar audience.
for sure.
Yeah, the specific survey data is published on NRMP website, and it's updated almost every year, a couple of months after the match result comes out. To reiterate the survey data that I mentioned earlier in the evening. So on average of the about 55 students that I surveyed who applied this past year, they applied to 43.5 IR programs. They interviewed at average of 19 programs. They applied to average of 15 DR programs only where they did not apply for IR program at that institution, and the average was 7 DR interviews, only DR interviews, not combined with IR, if that's helpful for people.
Thank you. So, Dr. Ion, you just brought up everyone's favorite topics, step 1. I did get a question. Does a strong step 2 CK score make up for a low step 1 score?
That's asked. There's many iterations to that question.
Yep.
So, and I'm also the advisor for the local students, along with some of the other students, the med schools. If you don't perform as well as you think you should have on step 1, step 2 gives you an opportunity. And sure, everyone can have a bad day. So if I would be a little bit strategic when you're, should I take my step 2 early, or should I wait, or should I not, take it after? If you feel like you're a good test taker and you didn't perform as well on step 1 for whatever reason, then I would encourage you to take step 2 early and crank on that score. It definitely would help. But if your step 1 score is kind of generally where you score, then a similar performance in step 2 might not be as helpful. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
I think that you kind of have to know yourself, and say, if you have the opportunity to really kind of like put in the time and do well on step 2, and you're not happy with step 1, I would definitely encourage that, because we definitely take that into consideration.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect.
Don't forget, board scores. There are a handful of programs they're going to look for high board scores. That's just human nature. But it is my opinion that the board scores, if it's high, it's great. If it's really low, that's probably gonna hurt you. But most of the students applying to IR are fairly, do pretty well. So it's not, like, for example, we don't say like, well, we need to have 269 or above. It doesn't really work like that.
Right. I mean, so step 4s have been shown to be reflective of your ability to pass other board exams, which matters to programs and matters to program directors. But in reality, the difference between a 240 and a 245 and a 250, I don't know that really matters. I completely agree that bad low is a bad sign for your ability to pass future board exams. And for the IR-DR program, you're going to get condensed training. You're not going to get as many DR rotations necessarily as everybody else in the same shorter period of time. So you are looking for people that you think can pass a test, but I don't think you're looking for like only 260s, only 270s, crazy numbers type thing.
Cool. Thank you. I did get a question. I don't know if anyone experienced this or whatnot, but someone was asking, they said that they know it's common to apply to IR and DR. Does anyone have any other thoughts about applying to IR plus something like vascular surgery? If any of the applicants have any thoughts, then we can go on to the program directors. Any of you guys have any thoughts about that?
So this is Molly, if the trainees don't have anything.
Yeah.
So the average number of specialties, types of specialties that people put for IR is above 2, which means they ranked more than just IR and DR on their applications. And I think that in the other competitive fields, you see that. So the other things, dermatology, orthopedic surgery, people are ranking more than just their one chosen field. Vascular surgery has certainly dropped in competitiveness, especially in the direct path, whatever that pathway is called now, where it's the short vascular surgery program. It's less competitive this year than it has been in the past years. So, I don't think that applying to multiple specialties, if it's something that you're really interested in doing, is a terrible thing, because in the end, there are lots of different types of doctors that do lots of similar things, and people can be happy doing a variety of procedures or taking care of a variety of patients from different angles.
All right, yeah, sounds good. And then I have another question for the program directors. Someone wanted to know, how do you guys view applicants from international medical schools?
That's a really good question. I think that we evaluate each application on its own merit. Certainly, the international schools that each program director familiarity with that particular school system or that country's educational system comes into play. I think it could be, I guess in certain ways, it may be disadvantageous to the applicant if they're applying from either a country or a program that the program director has no awareness of or history of, because it's since it's hard for the program director to make a educated decision due to our own ignorance, essentially. So I think it can hurt in that way, but international students are certainly considered based on their merit.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then some institutions have policies about sponsoring visas and things like that. But in general, I think people are evaluated on an individual basis on their application first.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Molly. Like I didn't consider that in the answer, which is, certain institutions will sponsor J1 visas, but will not do H1B visas, vice versa, what have you. So you kind of want to look at each institution's policies about sponsorship.
Sounds like good advice. My next question is, what advice do you have for someone who found IR very late in the game? I'm not sure if anyone on the panel kind of switched last minute in IR or anything that they have to add. Any of you guys have anything to say about that?
I was a little bit later, and also just Georgetown only recently changed its curriculum. So we finished third year at the end of June, and then we were able to do our first AI in July, which from my understanding is a little bit on the later side now. But so I did my home AI in July, and then I felt strongly about getting some DR experience because I knew that would be a significant part of my training, and I just wanted more background in it and more experience in it. So then I took some time in August to do a rotation in diagnostics. And then I felt like I didn't have really pertinent research. So then I took some time in September to get some research under my belt and to start studying for step 2. So then I didn't even really do an away until October. And then it was basically interview time. So it felt late at the time, but at the same time, it worked out well. And I felt like I was able to get a broad sort of experience in IR, in DR, in research, and then the testing that needed to be done, and even fitting in a way which I think was an important experience in terms of getting exposure to IR outside of my own institution. So I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I'd also just want to add on to that. I think, Dr. An said earlier that they want really enthusiastic people. So I think if you're a little late to the game, definitely demonstrating that you're truly enthusiastic about IR, getting involved in the SIR Med Student Council, submissions for the SIR annual meeting usually happen in September. So really getting to talk to your program and try to get involved in research to get an abstract accepted, I think is something that's doable even if you're a little late to the game. Do the program directors have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was all well put. You can only do what you can do. The society, the APDIR, the Med Student Council, everyone's been working very hard to introduce IR earlier in the medical student curriculum. But change happens slowly. So if you happen to get exposed to IR late for whatever reason, you gotta kind of strategize and get your ducks in a row and try to get as much exposure as possible. As we mentioned earlier, what the program directors want to know is the person applying to this specialty, are they making an informed decision? So you have a little catch up to do, but I think program directors in general understand that not all medical schools have IR early in the training. And so if you're concerned, like Rachel was mentioning about research, well, quality research is quality research. Sure, if you have a JVIR publication, that's the SIR journal. For those who don't know, that checks a couple of boxes. But we also recognize that, let's say you switch from doing ENT to IR and you have quality ENT research, that's actually a good reflection of who you are as well. So it's not all lost because you put in effort in another specialty before changing to IR. I think that's all taken into consideration.
Okay, just kind of continuing on with I think this question might have just been submitted right before you answer that, but this particular one is, if I have research experience that's not related to IR/DR, I found IR later in the game, is IR related research a must? And I think Dr. An just emphasized that that's not a must.
It's not a must. I mean, it helps, but it's like anything else, right? It's all part of the total package.
Yeah, sounds good. Then getting a lot of questions about research. How big of a box is research in general?
Do you want to talk about that, Mom?
I think it's program dependent. So it's nice to see. I agree with what Dr. An said earlier. It's nice to see that somebody can start a project and finish a project and take it to publication, because that takes a lot more work than you would think it would if you've never done that before. So I don't necessarily care if your research is in IR or dermatology or ENT or some crazy basic science thing. But the fact that you can actually do it and push it all the way through, I think, is a sign of your work ethic, which is important. Is it critical? No. I don't think that if you don't have any research, you're done and you shouldn't even apply. So I think it's sort of medium. I know that's a shady answer. Sorry.
No, I think that's fair. I think, sometimes there are people who are really big into research and they have a lot of research, but I think, other people that I've met who have been successful in terms of matching to IR were very good at doing other things outside of research, whether that was advocacy, just starting up, interest groups. I think those were things outside of research that seem to have helped them with their application.
Yeah, I think you want to show people that you can do something and take it to completion. I don't think it has to be research. It could be a variety of things outside of medicine or within medicine. But research is one way to show your work ethic and your intellect that is sort of easy for everybody to understand.
Definitely. All right, this is another kind of specific question, but it came through. What is considered a low step 1 score?
Can someone?
Below 220.
Okay, awesome.
I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I always get in trouble for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, but I mean, below 220 is not undoable by any stretch with a good step 2 score or a great work ethic or fantastic letters. But you know, you have to take into consideration that we have board exams that you have to pass, and there are hurdles to jump along the way. And I think a step score is a small reflection of your ability to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a question I definitely have when I was applying. So there's application for IR and DR, but then on top of that, there's the prelim applications, and not all IR programs match you directly into your intern year. So could the applicants kind of speak to the application process about prelims? First, if you apply to surgery, medicine, both TYs, and maybe discuss that process a little bit. So maybe Emily.
So I ended up applying to all 3 kinds of programs. I don't necessarily recommend it. I only applied to one internal medicine program, which is silly because when you pay for like applications, it's like a flat fee of $99 for the first 10 applications. So like if you're gonna apply to one kind of prelim, I would say just like max out at 10. If you're gonna apply like all 3, because you might as well get the most use out of your money. But at the same time, I'm glad I did it because I think that all the different kinds of prelim programs kind of like can give you something. And I think that there are some TY programs that can give you really great surgical training where they can get you hands-on. There are surgery programs that are, of course, very great hands-on training, but then there are some where you're essentially just running the list on the floors and not ever in the OR and not ever doing any procedures. And then I only applied to one medicine program, and that happens to be where I am now. And part of the reason why that is because it's a very flexible medicine program, almost like a transitional year where I have a fair number of electives. And so I get to do like a full month just doing vascular access. I get a full month in IR on top of medicine. And so I think that you should apply broadly, and at the same time, a lot of times your prelims are a time to apply nearby where you are, so you don't have to pay as much for traveling. But I think the important thing is to try and find a prelim that will kind of allow you to set yourself up well, but at the same time, like it's not the most crucial thing, is what I've heard from other people. Your real training, it sounds like, will be the residency. Mangala can probably speak better to that, but I think find a place where you'll be happy for a year is important.
Yeah, I agree with what Emily said. I also applied to all 3 when I was originally applying. I ended up at Emory's transitional year, partly because like this medicine year that Emily was talking about, it is allows you more elective time, and I got to do a diagnostic rotation as well as an interventional radiology rotation and other electives. I also was moving from the Northeast, and having to move only once was very helpful, as well as being able to learn the hospital system. Emory has multiple hospitals, and just getting familiar with that during intern year, I thought was an easier transition into residency. That being said, I will say that Emory, I know, is transitioning from having you able to choose your intern year to a categorical program, a surgical categorical year. So I feel like that's where a lot of the programs are headed. Doing IR rotations now, I think mine I had those electives, but it was also medicine, mostly medicine, and that gives you something. But I think surgery can also, I think technical skills are some of the things that now, like just suturing and being able to do those things is something that I'm learning, and eventually with practice you'll get. But I imagine that's something that if you did your surgical year, you would already kind of have.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly, I really found applying to prelims, and I applied the same year as Mangala, to be a huge black box. And I think one thing I want to emphasize is I had to talk to a lot of people who had like either applied to surgery. I ended up doing surgery, and I actually really liked it. To kind of understand what the prelims would be at different surgical and medical programs, especially as Emily was saying, you want something that'll give you a good exposure. And some of the programs out there, unfortunately, will use you as a scut monkey to try and find out what those are and try to identify good surgical medical TY programs is pretty key. All the panelists on this call tonight have graciously said that I could share their email. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to email them or email me if you have any specific questions. I think we have time for one last question that's pretty specific. I think this is more for the program directors. Someone is asking about letters of recommendation. Is having a PEDS IR letter of recommendation the same as having an adult IR letter of recommendation?
I guess it depends on what it says.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you did IR, you worked hard, you performed well. I mean, I think it's good. But a PEDS IR letter with no adult IR letter would make me ask some questions.
Okay.
I would also add to that, when you're looking for a letter, like, just maybe I'm being too basic here. You need to choose wisely. You want someone who has had enough exposure to you to be able to write something substantial besides a form letter. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you do your additional rotations, if you have any left, that you are selecting people. I mean, I guess if standalone pediatric IR letter is the only one you have, I guess that's, better than not having any IR letters, but I probably would consider getting I don't want to use adult IR, I guess, body IR letter. It's probably in your best interest. But, everyone's situation is different. If you really hit it off with a pediatric IR and that person's going to give you a glowing letter, that's also good.
All right, great. Well, it is nearing 10 o'clock here on the East Coast. So, and it looks like we made it through most of the questions. So I just want to thank our panelists. And like I said, I've put up everyone's contact info on the screen. Hopefully you can see that. If you have any follow-up questions for anyone, please feel free to email me or whoever you want to reach out to. And unless anyone else has any concluding thoughts, just thank you again to everyone that showed up. And I hope this was helpful.
Thanks for organizing this. It's been good.
Yeah,
thank you.
Great idea.
Thank you for inviting us, Mari.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing it.
Oh no, thank you guys
Thank you,
for
Mari.
showing up.
Yeah.
Hey, Mongol, are you still on the call?
I am, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry.
No, no, no. I'm just trying to figure out how to stop recording it. But I meant to ask you, like, when you guys, how much IR do you guys do in like R1 and R2 year? Just curious about Emory.
Yeah, so yeah, our 1 year we didn't do much. We only had one rotation actually, but this
Uh-huh.
year I have quite a few, like, or maybe like 3 months, like, yeah, or a little bit more than 3 months, like 15 weeks.
In second year?
hmm
Wow.
How much do you
Got it.
have? So I don't think it's not uniform, which is the weird part. It
Uh-huh.
kind of just worked out that way. But what about
Is that
y'all?
like specific for like only the IR residents get that much, or like the DR people get that much exposure as well?
No, I think it's was have like more like the IR residents got more. So the DR residents, I think some people, like everybody got at least, a few weeks, but
Hmm.
it was like the DR got maybe like 4 to 8 weeks versus we got like 12 to 14 or 12 to 15 or
Oh,
whatever.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, we're like, I mean, for now, we're the same as the DR residents
Yeah.
during the first 3 years. So we actually don't do any IR the first year, and then I think we do between like 4 to 5 weeks
The
this
rest of it.
year. Yeah.
It's nice, honestly, like, I love IR and I want to get as
Yeah.
much, but I think it is nice. I mean, you want to learn all the DR,
Yeah.
as well. So
Definitely.
I don't know if, like, yeah, I think it's finding a balance. So
Yeah. I think it's just like an interesting
yeah, definitely.
question people ask, and I'm like, how to give them a satisfactory answer. And then what else was I gonna ask you? So who else matched? I know it's you and did someone from UVA also go there?
So I think there's someone from UVA who's in a year below.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in my year, it's all four girls. I don't know if you know Nina, Julie, and Tina. It's the four of us here.
I think I met Tina.
Yeah, she went to med school with me as well, and Holly. Yeah. Tell
Oh,
her
really?
hi, yeah.
Holly's on IR at one of our affiliate hospitals right now, and I'm like, it's supposed to be one of the ones that like kind of entice people into IR. So I keep telling her like,
Oh my God,
you're
she would
not
be
gonna
so
switch.
great. She should switch, but I feel like she doesn't like it. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully she'll have a magical experience.
Yeah. Well, it was great to meet you
Yeah,
over.
thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. See ya. Bye.